She married a man she had never met, just to feed her son. She just didn't know that the stranger was a millionaire and was hiding the past of his missing sister. If this story interests you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us from which city you are watching us following. The cold wind cut through the deserted streets as Amelia looked at the last coins in her battered wallet. Her fingers trembled, not from the cold seeping through the broken window of the small apartment, but from the weight of the decision she would have to make in the next few minutes. In the next room, Luca slept restlessly, the fever still present, on his sweaty forehead. At 6 years old, her son already carried in his eyes a maturity that broke her mother's heart. Sitting on the edge of her worn-out bed, Amelia ran her fingers through her old cell phone, rereading for the 100th time the message that would change their lives forever. Would you accept a contractual marriage? Totally legal. No physical obligations, guaranteed payment, guaranteed future for your child. The proposal, coming from a certain Jonas, seemed too surreal to be true. But after the video of her trying to retrieve expired food from the back of the supermarket went viral, her life had already turned into a surreal nightmare. The thin walls of the apartment could not contain the sounds from the neighborhood. Upstairs, Donna Zephyr was dragging furniture around as she did every night, in a sleepless dance that had become familiar. Downstairs, Marlene's baby was crying, a cry that echoed up the stairs and mixed with the distant sound of sirens. Aurora never slept, just like Amelia's problems. She got up slowly, approaching the broken window that looked out onto the dimly lit street. Below, a black cat was crossing the cracked sidewalk, dodging puddles of water that reflected the yellow glow of the streetlights. The city seemed as lost as she herself, a place forgotten by God and men, where dreams died and hopes rotted like the fruit at the back of the market. The previous week had been a nightmare on an endless loop. After the video went viral, her life became hell. She lost her job as a cleaner at the downtown office. A matter of the company's image, they said. The mothers at Luca's school started looking at her differently, some with barely concealed pity, others with open contempt. The owner of the supermarket threatened to sue, only backing down when the story gained wider proportions on social media. But it was Luca's fainting spell at school that shattered the last barriers of her pride. Seeing her son lying in the playground, pale as wax from a hunger she couldn't quench, was like dying 1,000 times over. The school nurse tried to be kind, offering him a snack and words of comfort. But all Amelia could hear was the echo of her own failure as a mother reverberating off the white walls of the nurse's office. Her phone vibrated in her hand, making her jump. It was another text from Jonas. "I know you're considering the offer. The paperwork is ready. We can meet tomorrow if you like. Bring your son, he'll have everything he needs." The cold formality of the words was a stark contrast to the promise they held, a way out, a chance, a door opening when all others seemed closed. Amelia ran a hand through her dark hair, trying to gather her thoughts. She had been researching Jonas for the past few days, scouring every scrap of information she could find online. The information was sparse, as if he lived in the shadows of his own name. Jonas Montenegro, heir to one of the most traditional families in the country, but practically a ghost on social media and at public events. The few photos she found showed a tall man, always dressed in black, with a gaze that seemed to carry the weight of the world. The contract he emailed her was extensive and detailed. Prepared by a reputable law firm, every clause seemed designed to protect both parties. Civil marriage, separate residence but with scheduled visits, absolute discretion over the arrangement, and a monthly payment that would make all her debts seem like distant nightmares. In exchange, she would be required to attend certain social events as his wife, keep up appearances, and never question his motives. Luca coughed in the next room, a sound that pierced her heart like a knife. Amelia closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the tears she refused to shed. What choice did she have? What right did she have to hesitate when her son needed her so much? Pride was a luxury single mothers couldn't afford, not when the price was so high. She walked to her son's room, her footsteps silent on the old floor. Luca slept wrapped in a thin blanket, his dark hair plastered to his forehead from the fever. Beside his bed, the few toys he had were arranged with a care that broke her heart. A toy car missing a wheel, a patched-up teddy bear, a few half-used crayons. It was all she could give him, crumbs of a childhood that deserved to be so much more. She picked up her phone again, her fingers trembling over the keyboard. "I'll meet tomorrow." The message was short, but it carried the weight of a decision that would change their lives forever. The reply came almost instantly. A downtown address, a time, and precise instructions on how to get there and where to park, as if she had a car. She sat on the edge of Luca's bed, gently stroking his hair. Her son stirred in his sleep, mumbling something incomprehensible. Amelia tried to imagine what her life would be like from now on, married to a stranger who would pay to keep up appearances. Was this the price of survival? A cold contract to warm the hungry nights. Dawn crept slowly over Aurora, dragging promises and fears with it. In the small apartment, between peeling walls and broken dreams, Amelia watched over her son's sleep while planning every detail of the next day. She set aside her only presentable outfit, a simple blue dress that she saved for special occasions. She organized the documents she had, including Luca's birth certificate and school papers. But it was the documents he didn't have that weighed most heavily on his conscience. He had no photos of Luca's father, who had left town before the boy was even born. He had no records of his sister Clara, who had disappeared at the age of 17, leaving only unanswered questions and a void that never fully healed. His story was made up of absences rather than presences. The clock struck 3 in the morning when she finally allowed herself to lie down, not to sleep, but to mentally rehearse every possible scenario of their encounter. How would she explain it to Luca? What would she say when people asked her about her relationship with Jonas? How would she maintain her dignity when her entire future depended on a contract that bought her freedom? Outside, the city breathed its nocturnal secrets. Cars passed occasionally, headlights cutting through the darkness like knives of light. A dog barked in the distance, its lonely voice echoing between the decaying buildings. Aurora kept her stories in the cracked sidewalks, in the broken windows, in the shattered dreams of its inhabitants. And now she would keep one more, the story of a mother who sold her freedom to buy her son's future. Amelia closed her eyes, but sleep would not come. In her mind, the image of Jonas Montenegro mixed with her fears and hopes. Who was this man who offered salvation in the form of a contract? What was he hiding behind those heavy eyes she had seen in the photos? And why, of all the desperate women in the world, had he chosen her? The answer to these questions was closer than she imagined, buried in the past she had tried so hard to forget. In the unwritten pages of Clara's story, in the shadows of the Montenegro mansion's corridors, in the secrets that Jonas carried like invisible scars. But for now, all Amelia could do was wait for the dawn, clinging to the promise of a better future for her son, even if the price was her own soul. The law firm occupied the entire 10th floor of a mirrored building in the city's financial district. Amelia held Luca's hand tightly as the elevator ascended, her reflection distorted in the metal walls, revealing all her discomfort. She had chosen her best dress, the blue one she saved for special occasions, but still she felt out of place, like a speck on an otherwise perfect canvas. Luca, on the other hand, stared at everything with wide-eyed fascination. His son had never been in such a luxurious place. The lobby of the building, with its marble floors and suited security guards, looked to him like a castle straight out of the fairy tales Amelia read before bed. "Mom, why are we here?" he asked for the third time since they had left home. "To meet a friend, my love," she replied, the lie burning on her tongue. How could she explain to a 6-year-old that she was about to marry a stranger for money? What kind of example was she setting for her son? The elevator stopped with a soft hiss, and the doors opened onto an elegant hallway. An impeccably dressed receptionist stood waiting for them, her professional smile not reaching her eyes that assessed Amelia's simple attire. "Miss Amelia, please follow me. Mr. Montenegro is waiting." They were led through a maze of hallways decorated with abstract paintings and artificial plants to a conference room. The floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city, making Aurora seem even more distant and unreal. In the center of the room, a dark wooden table dominated the space, and at one end he waited. Jonas Montenegro was even more striking in person than in the photos Amelia had found online. Tall, with broad shoulders draped in a perfectly tailored black suit, he exuded an aura of restrained power. His eyes, however, were different than she had expected. They weren't cold or calculating, but instead held a deep sadness that caught her off guard. "Welcome, Amelia." His voice was low and controlled, as if each word had been carefully chosen. "And you must be Luca." He stepped closer, keeping a respectful distance, but his eyes lingered on the boy in a way that sent a shiver down Amelia's spine. "Luciana," he called to the receptionist, "could you take Luca to see our game room? I'm sure he'll like the new Xbox we installed." Luca's eyes lit up at the mention of the video game, something Amelia could never provide. Once they were alone, a heavy silence fell over the room. Jonas waved Amelia to a chair and sat down on the other side of the table, maintaining a distance that felt both professional and protective. "I imagine you have a lot of questions," he began, his fingers drumming lightly on the polished surface of the table. "Why me?" Amelia blurted out before she could stop herself. "Of all the desperate people in this country, why did you choose the woman in the grocery store video?" A sad smile crossed Jonas's lips. "Sometimes, Amelia, fate has a peculiar sense of humor." He opened a folder in front of her, revealing meticulously organized documents. "The contract is simple: civil marriage, absolute discretion, and a comfortable life for you and your child. In return, I require your presence at a few social events and your word that you will never question my motives." "And what are your reasons?" she insisted, unable to contain the curiosity that was eating away at her. "Some ghosts can only be exorcised with very specific rituals," he replied enigmatically, his eyes fixed on a distant point beyond the windows. "But we're not here to talk about my demons. We're here to secure your son's future." Amelia felt her hands tremble in her lap. The mention of Luca brought her back to the reality of her situation. "What happens if I refuse?" "You go back to Aurora. I'll find someone else, and life will continue on its natural course," Jonas replied, with a raw honesty that surprised her. "But before you decide, I'd like you to see something." He slid an envelope across the table. Inside were photographs of a mansion, with sprawling gardens and a swimming pool that looked like something out of a resort. This would be his new home. Luca would have his own bedroom, a study area, and the best private tutors. The international school is a 10-minute drive away. "And where would you live?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "I have my own residence. Our paths would only cross when necessary. Social events, the occasional dinner to keep up appearances." He paused, as if choosing his next words carefully. "I expect nothing beyond what's in the contract, Amelia. I'm not that kind of man." But what kind of man was he? The question burned in her mind as she scanned the photos. A pool where Luca could swim, a garden where he could play without fear of stray bullets, a library full of books that could feed his curious mind. It was more than she could ever dream of providing. "For how long?" His voice came out almost a whisper. "The initial contract is for 5 years with the possibility of renewal or amicable dissolution after that." Jonas pushed another folder toward him. "All the terms are here, including the confidentiality clauses and the financial guarantees for you and Luca." Amelia opened the folder with trembling fingers. The numbers printed there made her head spin. It was more money than she would see in several lifetimes working in Aurora. "What if something happens to you during this time?" A flash of pain, regret, crossed Jonas's face. "There are provisions for every eventuality. You and Luca would be protected no matter what." The afternoon sun was beginning to set, painting the room with golden hues that made the shadows seem deeper. Through the windows, Amelia could see her city stretching to the horizon, a sea of buildings and broken dreams where her life had so far unfolded. "Can I think about it for a moment?" she asked, even though she knew her mind was already made up the moment she saw the sparkle in Luca's eyes when he mentioned the Xbox. Of course, Jonas replied, rising to his feet with fluid elegance. But remember, Amelia, some opportunities only come once in a lifetime. He walked to the window, his broad back silhouetted against the orange sky. And some choices, no matter how difficult they may seem, are really the only ones possible. When Luca came back into the room, his eyes were shining with excitement. "Mom, did you see? They have all the games. And Aunt Luciana said there's a pool in the new house. Is it true that we're going to live there?" Amelia felt her heart tighten. She looked at Jonas, who was watching the scene with an unreadable expression, and then at her son, who was radiating a happiness she hadn't seen in a long time. The choice, as he said, had already been made. "Yes, my love," she replied, feeling the weight of the world shift on her shoulders. "We're going to live in a new house." Luca's smile lit the room brighter than the setting sun, but it was Jonas's gaze that made Amelia shiver. For a moment, when their eyes met, she saw something beyond the usual sadness, a glimmer of vulnerability, maybe even hope. But like the last ray of sunlight on the horizon, it disappeared as quickly as it had appeared, leaving only shadows and unanswered questions. The ceremony at the registry office was brief and cold as a winter morning. Amelia signed the papers with trembling hands, watching her own signature transform her life into something unrecognizable. Jonas remained distant and formal, only his gaze occasionally betraying an emotion she could not decipher. There were no kisses, hugs, or congratulations, just the sound of pen scratching paper and the discreet click of the camera recording the moment for legal purposes. The move into the mansion happened the next day, like a fever dream materializing. Without warning, the Victorian mansion, with its tall windows and meticulously manicured gardens, seemed to have come from another world, a parallel universe that Amelia didn't belong in, but was now forced to inhabit. Luca, on the other hand, adapted instantly, his cries of joy echoing through the halls as he explored every corner of his new kingdom. Mrs. Montenegro, the housekeeper, a middle-aged woman named Regina, greeted her with a mixture of respect and barely concealed curiosity. "Allow me to show you to your quarters." Amelia swallowed hard at the sound of her new surname, Montenegro, a name that carried weight, history, and expectations that suffocated her like a dress 2 sizes too small. She followed Regina through hallways decorated with old paintings and furniture that looked like it cost more than her entire previous life. Her bedroom, or rather her suite, was larger than her entire old apartment. A king-size bed dominated the space, covered in Egyptian cotton sheets that looked like solidified clouds. Her closet was already stocked with designer clothes she'd never dreamed of wearing, all in her exact size. In the marble bathroom, expensive, beauty products awaited her use, their French names sounding like incomprehensible poetry. "Mr. Jonas left specific instructions about your routine," Regina continued, handing her a state-of-the-art iPad. "Here is your schedule. Tomorrow your etiquette and social behavior classes begin. Next week we will have your first public event, a benefit dinner for the Montenegro Foundation." The reality of her new life began to weigh like lead on her shoulders. This wasn't just a new roof over her head. It was a complete transformation, a forced metamorphosis from chrysalis to butterfly. And Jonas, he remained a shadow in the corners of her existence, present only through notes left with the housekeeper and occasional bank deposits. The first few weeks were a whirlwind of adjustments and discoveries. Amelia learned the difference between fish and meat forks, memorized etiquette rules that seemed to have come straight out of a 19th century textbook, and gradually built a polished version of herself. Luca flourished at his new school, making friends and maintaining exemplary grades that filled her heart with pride. But it was at night that loneliness consumed her. Lying in that huge bed, Amelia found herself thinking about Jonas. Where was he? Why had he chosen this life as a ghost, present only through invisible gestures? The fresh flowers that appeared in her room every morning, the carefully chosen gifts for Luca, the occasional notes asking about his well-being, all of them indicated a man different from the cold businessman who had signed that contract. It was during one of those sleepless nights that Amelia decided to explore the mansion. Luca was fast asleep in his room, and the staff had already retired hours ago. Barefoot, her footsteps silent on the ancient wooden floor, she wandered the halls like a restless spirit. Each room held stories that she longed to know, secrets whispered between centuries-old walls. On the third floor, a half-open door caught her eye. Jonas's private library, a place Regina had specifically designated as off-limits. But something, curiosity, rebellion, or simple boredom, pulled her inside. The scent of old books and leather enveloped her like a familiar embrace. The bookshelves stretched from floor to ceiling, filled with volumes that told the story of the Montenegro family through the generations. But it was a half-open drawer in the massive desk that caught her eye. Inside, a red-covered diary, its pages yellowed with age, called to her like a siren. Her hands trembled as she opened the diary. The first page contained a single sentence, written in a delicate handwriting that made her heart stop. To my dear, Clara, may this diary hold our secrets. Love, Jay. Clara, her sister. The name she hadn't allowed herself to pronounce for years, the absence that hurt like a phantom limb. How had that diary gotten there? What connection did her missing sister have with Jonas Montenegro? A noise at the door made her turn sharply. Jonas stood in the doorway, his tall figure casting a long shadow on the Persian carpet. His eyes, usually controlled, now burned with an intensity that made her flinch. I see you found the diary. His voice was hoarse, as if each word caused physical pain. I wondered how long it would take. You knew my sister? Amelia managed to ask, her voice barely above a whisper. Jonas walked across the library in slow, deliberate steps, like a predator circling his prey. But when he got close, what Amelia saw in his eyes wasn't anger. It was a pain so deep it seemed like it could swallow the world. No is an inadequate word, he replied, taking the diary from her hands gently. Clara was everything. And I destroyed her. The air seemed to leave Amelia's lungs. Her legs felt weak, and she had to lean on the desk to keep from falling. All the mystery, all the strangeness of this arrangement was beginning to make a terrible sense. What happened to her? The words came out strangled from his throat. Jonas closed his eyes, as if the question were a physical stab. When he opened them again, Amelia saw unshed tears glistening in the dark irises. This is a story you deserve to hear in its entirety. But not here, not now. He placed the journal back in the drawer with reverent care. Tomorrow, at the benefit dinner, all eyes will be on us. We need to keep up appearances for now. For now, Amelia repeated, tasting the bitter irony on her tongue. There are things at work that you don't yet understand. Jonas took a step toward her, his presence enveloping her like a heavy blanket. Forces that would do anything to keep certain secrets buried. The contract, the marriage, it's all part of something bigger. For a moment they stood there, close enough to feel each other's warmth, far enough apart to keep their masks in place. Amelia could smell his perfume, wood and bergamot, mingling with the scent of old books. It was intoxicating. You planned this from the beginning, she realized, her voice betraying a mixture of admiration and horror. The marketing video, the proposal, everything. A sad smile curved Jonas's lips. I planned to watch you from afar, to protect you and Luca from the shadows. But fate, he paused, his eyes roaming her face with an intensity that made her shiver, had other plans. Before Amelia could respond, the sound of footsteps in the hallway caused them to jerk away. Regina appeared in the doorway, her face a mask of professional concern. Mr. Montenegro, your mother is on the phone. She insists on talking about arrangements for tomorrow. Jonas nodded, instantly composing himself. The mask of the cold businessman slipped back into place, like a second skin. We'll continue this conversation another time, he said to Amelia, his voice once again controlled and distant. Rest well. Tomorrow will be an important day. As she watched him leave, Amelia felt something shift inside her. The contract, which had once seemed like a gilded prison, now revealed itself as the first page of a much deeper mystery. And Jonas Montenegro, the man who had bought her freedom, held secrets that could either save her or destroy her utterly. The Imperial Hotel's ballroom glittered beneath thousands of crystals from a century-old chandelier, each facet reflecting not only the light, but also the invisible tensions permeating the air. Amelia adjusted for the 10th time the red dress Jonas had personally selected, a Valentino that cost more than a year's rent in Aurora. Her hair, now impeccably styled by one of the city's finest hairdressers, fell in soft waves over her bare shoulders. "Keep your head up." Jonas's voice sounded close to her ear, his firm arm offering support as they descended the main staircase. "You belong here as much as any of them." But they both knew that was a lie. The eyes that followed them were like needles, some curious, some malicious, all judging. The Montenegro Foundation's charity dinner was the most important social event of the semester, bringing together the cream of society in a calculated display of power and philanthropy. But this evening had a special flavor of scandal. It was the Montenegro couple's first public appearance since the whirlwind wedding that had shaken up the society columns. "Jonas, my dear," a voice as sharp as broken glass cut through the air. Helena Montenegro, the matriarch of the clan, was advancing toward him like a snake about to strike. Tall, thin, and impeccably dressed in a black Chanel suit, she was the epitome of decadent aristocracy. "And this must be your new wife." The way she said wife made Amelia feel like she needed a shower. Jonas gave her arm a gentle squeeze, a subtle gesture of support that didn't go unnoticed by his mother. "Amelia," he introduced himself with icy formality. "This is my mother, Helena Montenegro. Mother, this is Amelia Montenegro, my wife." Helena looked Amelia over from head to toe with the kind of gaze aristocrats reserved for particularly interesting insects. "Fascinating," she murmured, a false smile on her crimson lips. "It must be so different for you being in an environment like this, after that unfortunate incident at the supermarket." Amelia felt her blood run cold. Of course, Helena knew about the video. She had probably watched it dozens of times, savoring every second of her humiliation. "Actually," Amelia replied, surprising herself with the firmness in her voice, "it's refreshing to be in an environment where people care about helping those less fortunate, even if it's just for one night." Helena's smile faltered for a moment, but she quickly recovered. "Jonas has always had a weakness for lost causes. First Clara, now you. Some lessons are never learned, are they, dear?" Clara's name fell between them like a silent bomb. Jonas tensed beside her, his fingers gripping Amelia's arm hard enough to leave marks. "Not here, Mother." His voice came out low and dangerous. "Not tonight." "Why not?" Helena stepped forward, her expensive perfume choking him like poison. "Doesn't your new wife know about your previous obsession, about how you destroyed that poor girl, or maybe—" Her eyes glinted with mischief. "She knows more than she lets on?" Amelia felt her world spin. Helena's mention of Clara confirmed her suspicions. There was much more to this story than Jonas had revealed. But before she could fully process, a commotion from across the room caught her attention. Regina, the housekeeper, hurried across the room, her normally composed face now etched with obvious concern. "Mrs. Montenegro," she whispered as she reached Amelia, "it's about Luca. There's been an incident." Amelia's heart stopped. What happened? "He's fine," Regina was quick to add. "But we found something in his room. Something you need to see." Helena watched the exchange with predatory interest. "Trouble with the little bastard?" she asked, her voice dripping with sweet venom. "Maybe he inherited his aunt's impulses." Jonas took a step toward his mother, his posture changing from controlled to threatening in seconds. "Enough," he growled. "You can attack me, but leave my family out of it." "Your family?" Helena laughed, a mirthless sound that echoed like broken glass. "This woman you bought with a contract? This boy who doesn't have a drop of our blood in him? Is that what you call family now, Jonas?" Amelia didn't wait to hear the rest. With one last look at Jonas, she followed Regina out of the ballroom, her heart thundering against her ribs. As they walked through the luxurious corridors of the hotel, her mind whirled with terrifying possibilities. What could have happened to Luca? And what connection did it have to the secrets Jonas and Helena were keeping about Clara? The car was waiting for them at the hotel entrance, the driver, already with the door open. Throughout the journey to the mansion, Amelia tried to get more information from Regina, but the housekeeper remained evasive, only repeating that it was something she needed to see with her own eyes. When they finally arrived, Amelia ran to her son's room. Luca was sleeping peacefully, his serene little face illuminated by the superhero lamp. But on his study table, something made Amelia's blood freeze in her veins. An old photograph, yellowed with age, showed two smiling young women in front of a family home. One of them was Clara, her missing sister, 17 years old and with her whole life ahead of her. The other was a younger version of Helena Montenegro. "We found this among the old belongings that were brought up from the attic today," Regina explained softly. The boy was fascinated by the resemblance between the girl in the photo and his mother. Amelia took the photograph with trembling hands. On the back, a faded inscription read, "Helena and Clara, Summer 1995, Aurora." The pieces of the puzzle were beginning to fall into place, forming a picture she wasn't sure she wanted to see. Clara hadn't simply met Jonas, she had been part of the Montenegro world long before. But how? And why did Helena speak of her with such contempt? A noise at the door made her turn. Jonas was standing there, his impeccable suit now slightly disheveled, his tie loose as if he had tried to free himself from a force that was suffocating him. "You knew," Amelia accused, holding up the photograph. "You knew from the beginning who I was, who Clara was." Jonas closed his eyes for a moment as if gathering strength. When he opened them again, there was a steely determination in his gaze. "Yes," he admitted, "and now that my mother has shown her cards, it's time for you to know the whole truth. About Clara, about my family, and about why you're really here." Luca stirred in bed, mumbling something in his sleep. For a moment, Amelia felt the weight of all the lies, all the secrets, all the unspoken truths threatening to crush her. But when she looked back at the photograph in her hands, at her sister's smiling face, frozen in time, she knew there was no going back. "Tell me everything," she demanded, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "No more half-truths, no more secrets. What happened to my sister, Jonas? And why did you really bring me to this house?" Jonas's private office was weighted with decades of secrets on its dark oak walls. The lamplight cast dancing shadows. As he poured 2 generous shots of whiskey, his slightly shaking hands betraying his apparent composure, Amelia stood, still in her evening gown, the old photograph clutched to her chest like a shield. Clara arrived at the Montenegro mansion in the summer of 1995, Jonas began, his voice thick with painful memories. She was 17, full of dreams and an innocence that— He paused, taking a sip of his drink. "My family saw as an opportunity." Amelia sat up slowly, her heart beating an irregular rhythm against her ribs. "What kind of opportunity?" "My mother met her in Aurora during one of her charity works." The disdain in his voice was palpable. Helena always had a knack for spotting useful people. Clara was beautiful, intelligent, and most importantly, desperate for a chance to escape poverty. The words hit Amelia like a slap in the face. It was true. Her family had been through terrible hardships at the time. Her father had just died, leaving behind debts and a widow with 2 daughters to raise. Clara had always talked about getting a job in the capital, about changing their lives. "Helena brought her in to work as her personal assistant," Jonas continued, his eyes fixed on a distant point beyond the windows. "But the real plan was more complex. You see, at that time, my older brother, Ricardo, was about to take over the Montenegro enterprises, and he had a drug problem that needed to be kept secret." "What did Clara have to do with it?" Amelia asked, though she dreaded the answer. "My mother used her as bait." Jonas's voice came out strangled. "She manipulated her to get close to Ricardo, to keep him under control. Clara was young, beautiful, and in Helena's eyes, disposable." Amelia felt bile rise in her throat. "My sister, she was just a girl. I was 22 at the time." Jonas ran a hand through his hair, tousling it. I had just come back from Harvard, full of ideals and plans to modernize the family business. When I met Clara, he closed his eyes as if the memory were too physical to bear. It was like finding a ray of light in a dark basement. The realization hit Amelia like a punch. You fell in love with her. Hopelessly, Jonas admitted, his voice breaking. And she for me. We started meeting in hiding, planning an escape, a life away from the toxicity of the Montenegros. But then, Ricardo found out, or rather, Helena made him find out. Jonas downed the rest of his whiskey in one go. What happened next was a nightmare in slow motion. Ricardo, consumed by drugs and unhealthy jealousy, attacked Clara one night. I arrived too late to stop him, but in time to... He paused, his hands gripping the glass hard enough to shatter. Amelia could see the pieces falling into place, the violence, the desperation, the secrets buried beneath years of silence. Clara survived the attack, Jonas continued after a moment. But Helena, she turned it all into an elaborate lie. She convinced Clara that I had planned it all, that our affair was part of a plan to destroy Ricardo. She showed her doctored photos, created evidence, poisoned every memory we had built. And my sister believed it. With a broken heart and a shattered soul, yes. Jonas stood up, walking over to an old bookshelf. From behind some books, he pulled out a carved wooden box. Clara ran away that very night. She left only this behind. Inside the box, in addition to the diary that Amelia was already familiar with, there were letters, photographs, and a small gold locket. With trembling hands, she picked up one of the letters. Clara's handwriting, so familiar and distant at the same time, danced across the yellowed paper. My love, by the time you read this, I will be long gone. I cannot continue living in this nightmare, where every smile hides a betrayal and every promise of love is a calculated lie. Take care of Amelia for me. She is all that is pure in me in this world, and one day perhaps she will be able to judge whether what we did was out of love or malice. Eternally yours, Clara. Tears blurred Amelia's vision. Why did you never look for her? Why did you let this lie continue? I searched, Jonas replied, his voice thick with old pain. For years. I hired detectives. I searched every corner of this country. But Clara had completely disappeared, and Helena, she made sure that any attempt I made to expose the truth would result in dire consequences for everyone involved. And Ricardo? He died of an overdose 6 months later. Helena used her influence to hush up the case, turning it into a tragic heart accident. Jonas laughed humorlessly. The Montenegro family is an expert at burying their dead and their secrets. Amelia stood abruptly, anger boiling in her veins. And me? Am I just another pawn in your redemption game? A convenient substitute to assuage your guilt? Jonas crossed the distance between them in 3 long strides, his eyes burning with an intensity that made her flinch. No. He gripped her arms with desperate gentleness. You are so much more than that. When I saw your video, I immediately recognized the same eyes, the same strength that made me fall in love with Clara. But you... He touched her face with trembling fingers. You are different, unique. The contract, the marriage, and it started as a way to protect you and Luca, to keep Helena from hurting anyone else besides me. But, Amelia whispered, her heart thundering against her ribs. But I fell in love with you, Jonas admitted, his voice husky with emotion. Not as a shadow of Clara, not as a chance for redemption. I fell in love with the woman who faces the world with dignity, who loves her son fiercely, who makes me want to be better just by existing. The air between them grew thick with newly revealed truths and long-suppressed desires. Amelia could feel the heat of his body, the scent that had become familiar, the promise of something deeper than contracts and obligations. But before he could respond, a sharp scream cut through the silence of the night. A scream coming from Luca's room. Within seconds, they were racing through the halls of the mansion, their hearts frozen with primal fear. When they reached the bedroom, the window was open, the curtains dancing in the night breeze. The bed was empty. Where Luca should have been, there was only a folded note and a black rose, the Montenegro family's trademark. He's gone, Amelia whispered, her world crumbling around her. Helena took my son. The police station was bustling with its usual nighttime activity when Amelia and Jonas burst through the glass doors. The air conditioning struggled futilely against the stifling heat that was building up in the room, mixing with the smell of stale coffee and despair. At the counter, a sleepy police officer looked up from his magazine, but before he could speak, a familiar voice cut through the air. "I'll take care of this, Santos." Miguel Alves emerged from a side room, his dark eyes fixed on Amelia, with a mixture of concern and something else, something that made Jonas instinctively step forward, placing himself between them. Miguel had changed since his days with Amelia in Aurora. The skinny kid who had dreamed of police academy had become a solid man, with broad shoulders filling out his dark blue uniform and a thin scar cutting across his left eyebrow, the mark of some violent encounter with the underworld that was now his territory. "Amelia," he said softly, completely ignoring Jonas. "When I saw your name in the missing persons system, I couldn't believe it. How long? 5 years?" "Miguel," she replied, her voice shaking slightly. "Please, we need help. My son." "Your son is missing," he added, his professional tone barely concealing a note of bitterness. "And you're married to a Montenegro. Things change fast, don't they?" Jonas stepped forward, his presence dominating the space. "Deputy Alves, I presume. Can we focus on what matters? A child is missing." Miguel studied Jonas for a long moment, his eyes narrowed like a predator assessing a threat. "Of course, Mr. Montenegro. Why don't you tell me exactly what happened? And perhaps," he added, his eyes returning to Amelia, "you could explain how you ended up married to the man who may have killed your sister." Amelia's blood ran cold. Beside her, Jonas tensed like a violin string about to snap. "What are you talking about?" Miguel picked up a thick folder from his desk, opening it with deliberate slowness. "Interesting case. The disappearance of Clara Santos. Filed as a voluntary escape, but there were always loose ends. A poor girl from Aurora working for the Montenegros disappears without a trace. And now," he smiled humorlessly, "her younger sister turns up married to the main suspect. Too much of a coincidence, don't you think?" "You don't know anything," Jonas growled, taking a threatening step toward the deputy. "I know more than—" "You think?" Miguel replied, spreading photographs on the table. Clara wasn't the first person to disappear after getting involved with her family. In 1988, a maid named Maria Luisa. In 1992, an accountant who threatened to expose irregularities. In 1995, Clara. All connected to the Montenegros, all disappeared without a trace. Amelia picked up one of the photos with trembling hands. It was Clara, smiling beside Jonas in some sunny garden. They looked so young, so happy, so oblivious to the tragedy that awaited them. "Miguel," she said firmly, "Jonas didn't hurt Clara. It was Helena Montenegro. She manipulated everything. And now she's taken my son." The sheriff leaned forward, his professional interest clearly piqued. "Helena Montenegro, the matriarch. Why?" "Because she knows we've discovered the truth," Jonas interjected, his voice thick with restrained anger. "About Clara, about Ricardo, about all the secrets she's buried over the years." Miguel studied the two of them for a long moment, his years of police experience weighing every word, every gesture. Finally, he sighed heavily. "Do you have any proof?" Jonas pulled an envelope from his inside jacket pocket. "Letters, photographs, Clara's diary. And this," he placed a thumb drive on the table. "Financial records detailing every bribe, every threat, every life my mother destroyed to maintain her empire of lies." The deputy took the flash drive with professional care, his eyebrows raised in surprise. "Why didn't you bring this before?" "Because I was a coward," Jonas admitted, his voice breaking slightly. "Because I thought I could protect Amelia and Luca by staying away, by playing my mother's game. But now—" He looked at Amelia, his eyes filled with steely determination. "Now it's time to end all of that." A young officer burst into the room, his face flushed with excitement. "Officer, we have a location. The tracking on the cell phone that Mr. Montenegro activated is showing movement toward a property on the outskirts of town, an old farmhouse. The Stone House, Jonas finished, his face pale. The original Montenegro estate, where it all began, and where Clara spent her last night. Miguel stood up abruptly, already reaching for his holster. I'm going to need a tactical team if Helena Montenegro really is behind this. No, Amelia and Jonas said in unison. Helena is dangerous precisely because she has connections everywhere, Jonas explained quickly. If you mobilize an official team, she'll know within minutes. We need to do this discreetly. Miguel ran a hand over his face, clearly torn between his official duty and his protective instinct for Amelia. What do you suggest? You, me, and Amelia, no one else, Jonas offered. I have the access codes to the property. I know every corner of that place. If Helena's keeping Luca there, we can get in and out before she notices. What if she's not alone? Miguel asked. She's never alone, Jonas replied grimly, but I know the men who work for her. I know how to deal with them. Amelia, who had been absorbing every word in tense silence, finally spoke. There's something you need to know, something I found in Clara's diary. She pulled a folded paper from her bag, her hands shaking slightly. This isn't just about Luca, it's about Clara too, because she left a clue that suggests she might still be alive. The silence that followed his statement was heavy as lead. Miguel and Jonas exchanged tense glances, decades of suspicion and rivalry momentarily forgotten in the face of the magnitude of the revelation. The Stone House, Amelia continued, her voice gaining strength. Clara wrote about a secret basement, a place where Helena kept her darkest secrets, and on the last page of the diary, she left coordinates that point to this exact place. Jonas ran his hand through his hair in agitation. My God, all this time, could Helena have kept Clara prisoner all these years? There's only one way to find out, Miguel declared, checking his weapon with professional efficiency. But we must act now. The sun rises in 4 hours, and with it all our chances of surprise are gone. As they drove to the parking lot, Amelia felt the weight of 2 decades of secrets and lies weighing down on her shoulders. Somewhere in the darkness, her son waited for salvation. And maybe, just maybe, her sister too. The night was just beginning, and with it, the promise of revelations that could either heal or destroy all involved. The stone house loomed out of the darkness like a sleeping monster, its granite walls absorbing the moonlight as if feeding on the night itself. The once meticulously maintained garden was now a wild maze of twisted bushes and broken statues. Time had turned the Montenegro ancestral home into a mausoleum of poisoned memories. Jonas turned off the car engine at a safe distance, the silence of the night swallowing the engine's last breath. Beside him, Amelia clutched Clara's locket, found between the pages of the diary, its inscriptions promising secrets yet to be revealed. In the back seat, Miguel checked his gun once more, his years of police experience screaming that something was wrong in the deathly stillness. Security should be patrolling, Jonas muttered, his eyes sweeping the perimeter of the property. Helena never leaves this place unguarded. As if summoned by his words, headlights cut through the darkness in the distance, a car approaching down the dirt road. The three of them ducked instinctively, watching through the fogged-up window as a black Mercedes drove past them, heading toward the main gates. Helena, Jonas said, his voice thick with bitterness. I'd recognize that car anywhere. So Luca really is here, Amelia whispered, her heart racing at the proximity of her son. Miguel leaned forward, his voice low and urgent. What's the plan? There's a service entrance at the back of the property, Jonas explained, his fingers drumming nervously on the steering wheel. It was used by the servants back in the day. It leads straight to the kitchen and, more importantly, to the basement. The basement Clara mentioned in the diary, Amelia finished, her hands gripping the locket tighter. They moved like shadows through the abandoned garden, each step calculated to avoid the motion sensors Jonas knew were strategically placed. The air was heavy with the scent of dead roses and long-buried secrets. The service door yielded easily to the code Jonas had entered, 6 digits that spelled out Clara's birth date, a detail that made Amelia's heart clench. The interior of the house was a study in elegant decay. Peeling wallpaper revealed scars on the ancient walls. Furniture covered in white sheets looked like ghosts frozen in time. This way, Jonas led them through familiar hallways, each step echoing with memories he'd rather forget. Access to the basement is behind the pantry. But when they reached the kitchen, distant voices made them freeze. Helena was talking to someone, her words echoing through the ancient ventilation ducts. "You can't go on like this," Helena's voice sounded irritated. "All these years keeping you hidden, and for what? To see my own son marry that—" "Her sister," a second voice added, a voice that made Amelia stagger, her legs buckling under the weight of recognition. "Clara," she whispered, tears burning her eyes. "It's her. She's alive." Jonas caught Amelia before she could move, his arms wrapping around her in a protective embrace that was both restraint and comfort. Miguel was already in cop mode, his gun drawn as he assessed the situation. "We need to be smart," Jonas whispered, even though every fiber of his being screamed to run toward that voice he thought he would never hear again. "Helena is not alone. She must have security guards stationed." As if to confirm her words, heavy footsteps echoed from upstairs, guards making their rounds. And then, cutting through the air like a knife, came the sound that chilled Amelia's blood, Luca's muffled cry. "My son," she tried to pull away from Jonas, but he held her tighter. "Together," he whispered in her ear. "Let's do this together." Miguel gestured silently, indicating a side staircase that descended deeper into the house. The air grew thicker as they descended, thick with decades of secrets and lies. The staircase ended in a hallway lit by ancient lamps, its bare stone walls exuding dampness and mystery. It was then that they heard, crystal clear through a half-open door, Helena's voice. "Did you really think you could keep this a secret? Forever, Clara? That I wouldn't find out about the letters you've been sending, about the son you've been hiding all these years?" The shock of the revelation hit Jonas like a physical punch. A son. Clara had a son. But before they could fully process this information, a childish scream echoed through the hallway, Luca, no doubt. "Calm down, little one," Clara's voice sounded gentle, maternal. "Your mother is coming, I promise." Amelia waited no longer. With a strength born of maternal desperation, she freed herself from Jonas's arms and ran toward the voice. Miguel and Jonas followed her, all pretensions of secrecy forgotten in the face of the urgency of the moment. The scene they found when they burst through the basement door would forever be etched in their memories. Helena Montenegro, elegant, even in her wickedness, wielding an antique weapon, a family heirloom. Clara, older but still beautiful, shielding Luca with her own body. And leaning in a corner, a frightened-eyed teenager who was the spitting image of Jonas in his youth. "Ah," Helena smiled, a smile as cold as death. "Finally. The family is reunited." Time seemed to freeze in the basement of the stone house, each breath hanging in the air thick as drops of lead. The gun in Helena's hand gleamed in the yellow light, her aim flickering between the people present, like a snake undecided about which prey to strike first. 20 years! Helena broke the silence, her voice dripping with sweet venom. 20 years of keeping secrets, protecting the Montenegro name, sacrificing everything for family. And for what? She laughed, a mirthless sound that echoed off the stone walls. To see my own son fall for the same damned bloodline, twice. "Mom," Jonas stepped forward, his eyes fixed on the teenager in the corner. His son, the truth Helena had buried for 2 decades. "Put the gun down. It's over." "Is it over?" Helena tilted her head, her eyes shining with a madness cultivated by years of absolute power. "Nothing ever ends for the Montenegros. We survive, always, no matter the cost." Clara, still shielding Luca with her body, shifted slightly. "How did Ricardo survive, Helena? How did all the others you destroyed to keep your secrets survive?" The mention of Ricardo made Helena visibly shudder. Ricardo was weak, like all of you, weak, sentimental, incapable of understanding the true meaning of power. Power has corrupted you, Mother, Jonas said, his voice thick with an ancient sadness. It has turned you into a monster who sacrifices his own children on the altar of the Montenegro name. Miguel, who had kept his gun trained on Helena since they entered, noticed a movement in the shadows. "We have company," he murmured. Figures emerged from the shadows of the basement, armed guards, their expressions void of any emotion beyond blind obedience. Helena smiled triumphantly. "Did you really think I wouldn't be prepared?" she teased. "That I wouldn't have a plan for every possibility? I always have a plan, like that night 20 years ago. The night you tried to kill me, Clara." Finished, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "The night I found out I was pregnant with Jonas's child." The teenager in the corner, Thomas, Clara had whispered to him, looked up, meeting Jonas's gaze for the first time. It was like looking into a mirror from the past. The same eyes, the same bearing, the same intensity. "I should have completed the job," Helena growled. "But you've always been as slippery as a snake, haven't you, Clara? You ran away, you hid, you gave birth to a freak who threatens everything I've built." "Thomas is not a freak," Amelia said, her voice cutting through the air like a whiplash. "He's a Montenegro, whether you like it or not. Just like Jonas, just like Richard should have been if you hadn't destroyed him." Helena whirled around, the gun now pointed directly at Amelia's heart. "You know nothing about Ricardo, about what I had to do to protect him." "Protect?" Jonas laughed bitterly. "You poisoned him, Mother, literally and figuratively. You used Clara as bait. You manipulated his weaknesses, and when he threatened to expose everything, he needed to be silenced," Helena finished coldly, "just as you all need to be." It was then that Luca, taking advantage of a moment of distraction, escaped from Clara's arms and ran towards his mother. "Mommy!" It all happened in a matter of seconds. Helena spun, her gun following the boy's movement. Jonas leapt forward, his body driven by an instinct stronger than fear. Miguel fired, the deafening sound reverberating off the stone walls. Clara screamed. Thomas emerged from the shadows with surprising agility. Chaos broke out in the basement. The security guards advanced, but years of pent-up guilt and hidden secrets had prepared Jonas for this moment. He moved like a force of nature, his fists meeting flesh with precision born of desperation. Miguel, trained for situations like this, neutralized two men with professional efficiency. Amelia reached for Luca, wrapping her arms around him as if she could absorb him back into her body, protect him from all the evil in the world. Clara and Thomas fought side by side, mother and son united after 20 years of forced separation. And Helena. Helena Montenegro stumbled back, her eyes wide with surprise as she watched the red stain spreading across her pristine Chanel coat. The ancient weapon slipped from her fingers, clinking against the stone floor with sinister finality. "Impossible," she muttered, her legs giving way. "I'm a Montenegro." Jonas caught her before she hit the ground, centuries of family conditioning stronger than 2 decades of hatred. He held her in his arms as the life slipped from her, her eyes fixed on his with belated clarity. "I'm sorry," she whispered, blood staining her perfectly painted lips. "I just wanted to protect the family." "I know, Mom," Jonas replied softly, silent tears streaming down his face. "I know." The silence that followed was broken only by Luca's suppressed sobs and the distant sound of sirens, reinforcements Miguel had called before they entered the estate. The Montenegro dynasty, built on secrets and sacrifice, was crumbling along with its matriarch. Clara approached slowly, Thomas at her side. Amelia, still hugging Luca, watched the scene with a mixture of horror and relief. The nightmare was ending, but dawn would bring with it a new set of challenges. "It's over," Clara said softly, touching Jonas's shoulder. "It's finally over." But as he held his mother's lifeless body, as he watched his newfound son, as he felt the weight of Amelia's gaze on him, Jonas knew that nothing was truly over. This was just the beginning, the start of a new story, a chance to rebuild everything Helena had destroyed with her obsession for power and control. The sun was beginning to rise, its first rays penetrating through the old basement windows, illuminating the survivors of this long night of revelations. And with the light came the promise of a new day. A day without secrets, without lies, without the suffocating weight of the name Montenegro. A year had passed since that fateful night at the stone house. The Montenegro's Victorian mansion, once a mausoleum of secrets and pain, had been transformed. The windows, now always open, let in light and fresh air. The gardens, lovingly and carefully renovated, burst with colors that seemed to compensate for decades of darkness. Amelia watched from the porch as Luca and Thomas played catch on the lawn, their laughter echoing through the property like music. It was still surreal to see her young son with the older brother he never knew he had, an unexpected gift born of an ancient tragedy. Clara appeared at her side, 2 cups of steaming coffee in her hands. The sisters met in a knowing smile. 20 years of separation dissolved by the months of reconnection and healing. "Sometimes I still can't believe it," Clara murmured, her eyes following the boys' movements. "That we're all here, that we survived, that we found a way back to each other." Amelia picked up her cup, the rich aroma of coffee mingling with the scent of the roses Jonas had planted, red, just like Clara had always loved. "I guess some stories need time to find their true ending." The sound of a car driving up to the property caught his attention. Jonas was returning from the office where he had spent the last few months restructuring the Montenegro Empire. After Helena's death, much had changed. The foundation now truly helped people in need, business was conducted transparently, and the name Montenegro was slowly beginning to mean something other than power and corruption. Miguel had also moved on. Promoted after the events at Casa de Pedra, he now led a task force specializing in corporate crimes. He occasionally had dinner with them. The old rivalry with Jonas transformed into a mutual respect born of that night of confrontation and revelation. Jonas climbed the porch steps, his eyes finding first Amelia, then Clara. Time had softened the edges between them, transforming a tragic love story into something more complex and mature, a family bond forged through pain and redemption. Thomas showed his semester grades. "Today," he commented, fatherly pride evident in his voice. "First place in math and physics, just like—" "To you," Clara added with a soft smile. "You've always been a genius with numbers." The moment was interrupted by Luca, who ran upstairs with the endless energy of his 7 years. "Dad, come see what Thomas taught me." "Father," the word still, made Jonas's heart leap. Not by blood or obligation, but by choice, by love. He followed the boy into the garden, where Thomas waited for him with a shy smile that was pure Montenegro. Amelia watched the 3 of them together, her heart overflowing with a kind of happiness she had never imagined possible. "You know," she said to Clara, "when I signed that marriage contract, I thought I was selling my soul." "It was," Clara replied softly, "but sometimes we have to lose everything to find something greater." The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. In the mansion's library, Clara's diary now occupied a place of honor, no longer a repository of dark secrets, but a testament to survival and hope. The Casa de Pedra had been transformed into a support center for vulnerable women, a joint project by Clara and Amelia, funded by the Montenegro Foundation. The walls that once held tragedies now echoed with stories of recovery and new beginnings. Jonas joined them on the porch, his arms wrapped around Amelia from behind as they watched. The boys play. The love between them had blossomed slowly, like a rare flower that needed time and care to reveal its true beauty. It wasn't the torrid romance the newspapers had speculated, nor the cold arrangement Helena had planned. It was something deeper, more true. "I found this today," Jonas said, pulling an old envelope from his pocket, "among Helena's papers." It was a photograph yellowed with age. It showed a young Helena, smiling genuinely as she held a baby, newborn Jonas. On the back was a single handwritten line, "To my son, may he never have to choose between love and duty." She got lost somewhere along the way, Clara commented, softly, between protecting her family and controlling everything and everyone. How we all almost got lost, Amelia added, lacing her fingers with Jonas's. Dusk was falling, shrouding the mansion in soft shadows. But now the shadows no longer. Held secrets no longer carried a weight of decades of lies and manipulation. They were just shadows, as natural as the cycle of day and night, a reminder that even in the deepest darkness, light always finds a way back. Thomas and Luca ran back to the porch, their faces flushed, with exercise and happiness. Clara opened her arms to her son while Amelia did the same for Luca. Jonas watched the scene with teary eyes, his family built not through blood or contracts, but through choices, forgiveness, and unconditional love. So, Luca asked, his childish voice thick with curiosity, this is our happily ever after story? Jonas knelt in front of the boy, ruffling his hair lovingly. No, champ. This is our real story, and sometimes that's even better than happily ever after. Amelia smiled, remembering the desperate woman who had once raided a market in search of food. That woman never imagined that her act of desperation would lead to not only survival, but the redemption of an entire family. The wind blew softly through the garden, carrying the scent of roses and fulfilled promises. In the Montenegro mansion, where ghosts and secrets once dwelt, now echoed laughter and truths. And at the heart of it all, a love that began with a contract but blossomed into something no paper could ever contain or define. The real miracle, after all, was not in the happy ending, but in the journey that got them there. In the choices they made, the truths they faced, and the love they found in each other along the way.